So we are recording live. This is our first episode of Huddle and Whistle. I am Dr. Marlo Nicole, one of your hosts. We have Terry Collins, Esquire, and Jimmy Mack on, and these guys are geniuses when it comes to sports between their own experiences and their experiences as players and coaches. So I can't wait to get into today's show. Today we're talking about what the media's role is in shaping icons. And specifically, we're going to talk about some of your famous and favorite players, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. So let's just dive in right now. The legend of MJ. What's your feelings about Michael Jordan? You know, there's so many different sides to that story. You have some people that think he's great, some people that think, it's just hype. But all I know is his name alone after basketball, he's been able to generate a significant secondary income just off of his name. What do you guys think?
Well, it's undisputed that Michael Jordan is a GOAT. He may not be everybody's GOAT, but he's the majority of most people that follow the NBA. They're GOAT because he was just this prolific scorer. Now, one of the things that I find interesting is that you have a lot of players today and players that played against him that title him as somebody who was flawless. You will often hear, Michael Jordan had no weaknesses. And I just really want to do a deeper dive into what that really means. And so I looked at Michael Jordan's 1986-1987 season because that was his most prolific scoring season, where he averaged 37 points a game on 48% shooting. And, at face value, that seems like a remarkable accomplishment. Like, who could deny those numbers? But then when you do a deeper dive into it, the media never talked about the fact that Mike took 28 shots a game. So 28 shots a game to average 37 points, and when you look at the fact that he also took 12 free throws a game. Now, when you look at field goal percentage, if somebody makes a shot attempt on goal and they get fouled, that does not count as a field goal attempt. So if he took 12 free throws a game, that means he had to take a minimum of 6 additional shots. So if you add those 6 shots to his 28 attempts per game, Mike really took 34 attempts on goal a game. Now, if you take 34 attempts and you average 37 points, I don't know if that sounds like somebody who was flawless as a scorer or somebody who benefited from a system, the triangle offense, that deemed him the number one option. Because if you gave Steph, LeBron, KD 34 attempts on goal, I truly believe they would have more than 37 points. So, whether or not he's flawless, whether or not he's the greatest ever, I do think it begs the question when you really take a deeper dive into the number and say the man got 34 shots. How much should he average?
What you think, Jim?
I agree with that. Just looking at the psychology of why like people like that. So we are also at the time where Michael Jordan has come into his own, and you said the 86-87 season where he was at his most prolific scoring. Video games came out. You can be Jordan. You can be these players. As Lakers versus Celtics had just come out. Double dribble. So you know that.
Double dribble. I remember double dribble.
Yeah, and things like that. So people kind of, I'm going to be Mike. So if I'm being Mike in this video game, I'm taking 34 shots, probably 40. So it was just like how, to me, it's like the time, how it correlates with who we are as people. Because when we are trying to do things, or we think of being the dominant scorer, especially in basketball, and we just keep it in basketball, I got to get the ball. I got to get my shots up. And that's what we saw a lot of the greats are the number one option on teams, that they're going to get their shot. So like you said, 30, it probably took them 34 shots to get 37 points if you count in the free throws and stuff like that. And I think that people would rather do that themselves. And that's why they are so fixated in what he was doing, because I want to take all those shots too. I want to have that green light to do that, because a lot of us played little league basketball. What's your coach telling you? Pass the ball. move the ball around, get the ball to the open guy, and then you're watching on TV. This dude, like, I got 3 defenders on me. I'm still shooting the ball. I ain't doing all that. So it becomes a mindset, and I think that helps the myth out because you're like, I see somebody doing what I can't do, or he's not being held back from doing that, and he's at the highest level. So he must be the greatest. He must be doing something that allows his coaches to want him to do that. So that's part of the psychology of it. But I also think like it's something like Clyde Drexler said. He said I could have easily been Michael Jordan. I could have took a bunch of shots and made a bunch of free throws too, and put up the same numbers. And when you look at a guy like Clyde Drexler, he was only taking like 17 shots a game. So of course his numbers were down. But Michael Jordan's taking at least when they're counting the stats, 10 more shots. So he's feeling like if I could have did the same thing. So I think when it comes to how people even analyze sports and the statistics of sports, they don't get it. So they just go by what they see with the raw numbers. And they be like 37 points a game. That's amazing. Only person that ever averaged more was Wilt. And I think Elgin Baylor. So people are like, man, this guy got to be at. And at the time, man, his swag and how he moved on the court also helps with the myth. Everybody wasn't moving like that. Everybody wasn't doing like that. And because he played in the third biggest media market, we got to see him a lot. Even when the Bulls are getting blown out on the TV by the Celtics or by the Pistons, he was putting up 40. They were losing by 30. So it's kind of like, yeah, if he had help, he would be great. If he had another player. So all that plays into his myth of who he was. Now, I understand that maybe if he moved the ball around more players would have scored. He had more help.
You know, it's funny that you guys say that. First of all, I agree with you 100%, but I never considered the mindset aspect of it because when I was playing basketball, my coach was like, you know, get Marlo the ball because I was the shooter on the team. And so it's completely a mindset because I could have 2 defenders on me, but they had to get me the ball. And 90% of the time, I probably wasn't going to pass it back out. So it makes so much sense. And it's also one of the reasons that, you know, God bless his soul, Kobe Bryant, you know, he gave me a completely different perspective on that too, since we're talking about GOATs. And he said almost to what you just mentioned, Jimmy Mack, he said that he sees these guys practice. He knows who's in the gym. He's the first one there. He's the last one to leave. So this all started because, again, the media was asking him, why is it that you would take this shot when you have 3 defenders on them, right? Mathematically, you know, if somebody has 3 defenders on them, there's 2 other people on your team open.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I take the shot because I trust myself. You know, he knows who works hard, right? So just to make a slight comparison, although I'm nothing like Kobe, you know, on one hand, the mindset is the coach is saying, get this player the ball. On the other hand, the mindset is, I trust myself better to make these shots despite who's on me, you know, than the whole team because I know how seriously I take this. So that's crazy, but it's true.
You know, and to follow up with that, just in terms of like the mindset or the challenges of it, it's difficult to take 34 shots a game. Like you have to be prolific just to get those number of shots up, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
this is not necessarily a knock on Mike, but the fact that he was able to get off those number of shots is impressive. But I do think, you know, it probably falls a little bit more in line on the system and it impacts the mentality of the other players too. So let's take Ron Harper, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Ron Harper played for the Clippers, he averaged 20 points a game for like the 4 seasons before coming to the Bulls, right? And when he got to the Bulls, Ron Harper averaged 6, 8, 9, and 7 points a game. You know, it's not that he, you know, forgot how to score, you know, but I just think the system just dictated like, hey, when his shot clock gets down to 10, ball goes to Mike on the elbow, you know, we rather have him taking the shot than you know. And so I'm just wondering, you know, did the other players on the team get their just due from the media in terms of their actual contributions or the sacrifices that they had to make for their career? Or, you know, because now, you know, I'm averaging less points to fit this system and be a great teammate, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and all the credit is going to Mike, which he performed on the greatest lights, you know, under the biggest lights, Mike did perform. But I do think the media may not have always showcase the sacrifices that were made and the contributions that were made from the team, from the other teammates.
Yeah. It's just a counterpoint with the Kobe thing. People will always say I'm a Kobe hater. I'm not. I just put them in context. Um, the counterpoint to the work ethic, like we are hearing nowadays, like KD, and the people be like his work ethic isn't good. KD practices on efficiency. He's like, I'm not going to get up 100 shots in a game, so I'm gonna get up these few shots and see where my game is going. So sometimes with a guy like Kobe, he was an overworker. He's going to overwork, overwork, overwork. Of
Yeah.
course, when he sees somebody else not putting in that work, he's going to think you're not working as hard as him. I can't trust you. But what he doesn't understand, everybody doesn't need that work. Like everybody doesn't need to go out there and practice. Like KD is just a natural shooter. I watch KD shoot. It's just like, dude, it's like he was born shooting. Like he came out, mom, like, hey, let's go, let's do this. Where other people have to work harder for that. And being a person who I wasn't always the greatest practice player because I'm like, okay, if I get hurt out here or something happened, I'm not going to be ready for the game. So I would give about as minimum of a good effort in practice because I want to save myself for what I thought that really counted. So I can imagine being Kobe's teammate and he'd be like,
You're
oh, I can't
slacking.
trust him. Yeah, he's
Yep.
slacking. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I don't, you know, with Kobe, basketball was everything. So him being in the gym 3 or 4 times a day meant something to his life. Where other people like, man, this is what we got practice time for. I'm about to go be with family. I'm about to go be with friends. I got other business adventures that I want to do. Let me go take care of this other side stuff because I can't play basketball forever. So I get his point. You want other people to love the game the way that you love it and work at it like that. But that's not going to be everybody, and that's not going to determine your greatness either. So yeah, I like people with good work ethic, but I like a person that shows up for the game more because that's when it really counts.
Yeah, true. I mean, but with all that being said, is that really the coaches doing, or is that the players doing, or is that the media's doing? Because the media is only going to highlight what's being played, right?
Hmm.
I wonder the mindset of the coaches. Like, are the coaches saying, you know what, Kobe take 1,000 shots, or MJ take 1,000 shots, or whomever take all the
Hmm.
shots, despite who's guarding you, because they know how to create space and get open, or is that something that everyone knows the media wants to see, so they highlight it in that way?
I think that reminds me of a position that Phil Jackson talked about when there was a controversy between Kobe and Shaq. And Kobe was playing at a very high level, right? And Shaq wanted to slow the ball down so that he could play at his pace, right?
Yeah.
And Phil Jackson said, well, Kobe is playing at such a high level. I'm not going to tell him to slow down, you know? And so if I see him taking these shots that are contested, but he works on them day in and day out, I can't tell a player not to take shots that he's working on. And I can't tell him to change his game for anybody else because he's one of the best. So, you know, I do think that the coach can set the tone, but it also depends on the temperament of the coach. Like your coaches said, give Marlo the ball. Well, I want to shoot too. You know what I'm saying? I worked on this. Why am I going to keep working on this shot and you're going to tell me to give Marlo the ball anyway? So it don't take me 10 hours of practice to pass you the ball,
Yeah.
because I know what this system is designed for us to do.
Yeah.
So, I think all of those things impact players and their mentality, especially role players.
Yeah, I agree with Terry. It's the coach, that individual player, and how his teammates feel. If the teammates know, like, man, this dude is gonna get us out of trouble. I don't mind getting him the ball in this moment, or you know what, let me just fall in line. Let me just pass him the ball so he can take these shots. That goes. And then also with the coach, Michael Jordan was against the triangle offense when it first was installed because he had to pass the
Yeah.
ball more. But then when it worked, when Scotty's starting to get off, and Horace Grant at the time when it first got installed, they're getting off. Man, it took a lot of pressure off of him, and then you see that they started winning. It was a stat that I found out when Jordan shot the ball 10 times more than the next player on his team, they never won a championship. But when that got into single digits, where he was like maybe 8 or 7 more shots than the next person, that's when they won all 6 of their championships. So it's something like that. Because if you keep your teammates engaged, they want it more. Like Just
Yeah.
imagine if Paxson gets that shot against Phoenix and goes, "Oh shoot, I ain't got no confidence in this." He probably misses that shot. That shot won a game and won a championship. So it's also having your teammates understand their role and being super comfortable in that role. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna take 15 shots, but my 10 or 12 matters for our success. That's where it works. But then sometimes, it don't work like that. Guys are like, I'm checked out. He about to jack up 37 shots. I'll be all right. Give me my check. I'll sit at the end of the bench. So
Yeah. That would have been me. That would have been me 1000%. Um, but back to like these icons and players like MJ. What do you guys think in terms of him not just being an athlete but being a brand, and how that business aspect, maybe influenced the media narrative? Like, for instance, it's 2025 right now, and Jordan's been retired for what? How many years now?
22.
Well, exactly 22 years, and he's still an icon. How does or how did the media kind of help elevate his brand, outside of him even being just a basketball player? That is crazy.
In the early days of Jordan, Nike, Gatorade, McDonald's, they needed a face for their product. And he was the most willing face of it all. Because in the late 80s, early 90s, he was selling everything. Like, you couldn't see a commercial without him being in it. I mean, think of the song, like Mike. If I could be like, I still remember that song. Or him with Larry Bird shooting the ball from the moon to get into the basket over McDonald's fries. Or his shoes. I mean, his shoes is the biggest thing that's out there for anybody, no matter what. When they first came out to now, his shoes are still a big part of people's lives. So I think with that, if early media, you couldn't scrutinize him because he was such the pitch man. He was such the person that can get commerce going. So it was just like, if I say something bad about him, who knows who's going to come after me as a person? You know what I'm saying? Also, he was young, and a lot of the sports reporters were older. They're not in the club with Michael Jordan. They're not hanging out with him. They're not doing that. They only have access to him when they're doing their job. We
Hmm.
look at the modern day athlete, they in the club with the reporter. They hanging out with the reporter. So the reporter has so much access to them now. And then anybody, like how we're doing this, anybody can be in there and then start their podcast. Like, yeah, I was at the club with LeBron last night. This is what he was doing. Blah, blah, blah. So I think more so because he was such a great pitch man, and he was so entrenched in our lives. I dare not say nothing bad about him because I don't know how that will impact my journalism career. And then for those companies, their products are flying off the shelf, flying off the shelf. I mean, remember, it was Super Soccer was the Gatorade's competition. They didn't have Jordan, so Gatorade took off, and Super Soccer don't exist anymore. So it's just one of those things. Like, the media helped him out because he was so great and he was so easy to put in front of a screen and say, "Here, play basketball," and we'll record this commercial about playing basketball. Not like you have to give any powerful speeches or anything like that. So it was easy to sell him, and I think that helped a lot with just not just media, but with the common man who's seen him.
And we have to keep in mind that during the 80s and the 90s, the media, the NBA, not just the media, but the NBA specifically controlled all of the content.
Hmm.
So, only 38% of the games were televised. And if you heard anything about Michael Jordan, it came from the color commentators that were announcing the game. There was no TNT with Kenny, Shaq. There was no Skip and Shannon. There was no Stephen A. There were no podcasts that could give you an objective opinion about Mike. And, I think that, like what Jimmy Mack was saying is that Mike was selling products. He was growing the league, and he was their number one guy because the marketing of the NBA switched. It used to be Lakers versus Boston. Then it became Bird versus Magic.
Yeah.
Then it became Jordan,
Hmm.
right? So now the face of the league is one person. It's no longer a team. It's no longer a rivalry. He became the face, and you could not criticize the face. So one guy did criticize the face, and that was in 1994. Steve Wolf, who worked for Sports Illustrated,
Mm-hmm.
he wrote a story about Mike during his baseball tenure, right? And his statement was bag it, Michael, you're embarrassing baseball, right? And Michael Jordan responded by refusing to do Sports Illustrated interviews. Okay. He even took it a step further where Michael Jordan said he would no longer sign an autograph on Illy Sports Illustrated magazine. So what did Sports Illustrated do? They fired Steve
I was
Wolf.
just about to say
Mm-hmm.
they got rid of him.
He
You're
got
costing us
fired.
money.
So now if you're a reporter, if you're a color commentator, you know not to say anything disparaging against Mike, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't even get media credentials. Like I've been covering professional sports in the media for about 5 years now, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to get access to the bigger games is huge.
Yes.
So if you work for a small publication, you may get to cover some regular season games, but when it comes to the playoff, when it comes to rivalries, you just get knocked out by other large markets, and unless you have a relationship with the team, right? So if you're a writer and you wrote anything negative about Mike, you have zero access to the media and you get fired. So, it's Mike really just had the entire NBA and the media under his thumb. Like you just couldn't do it because it's about dollars and cents. And the NBA is not going to let you talk bad about their face. You just simply can't do it. And so I do definitely think that the media built his brand and they protected him. He was more protected than anybody. And when they did give him some level of slight criticism, he didn't take to it too well. And he even said it himself, like some of the pressure of the media contributed to him
Mm-hmm.
taking a year off. He did deal with the issues with his dad, but the pressure from the media did get to him. This is him saying this, and so, if you're heralded and then somebody turns on you, that just may not always be easy to digest.
Yeah, but that also goes with the access. Like, the more access you have to an athlete, the more you're gonna know about what they do on and off the court. And sometimes what they're doing, what makes them great on the court, is based on how they live off the court. Like with Allen Iverson, they told him if you just stay clean, don't party and all that stuff, you're gonna be good. He had the worst stretch of basketball he ever played, so he went back to the partying. He went back to doing all the bad stuff because that also translated to his psyche and mentality on the court. So sometimes when people have more access, and then you also got to understand this nowadays in modern times, this plays a big role on your image because anybody can see you anywhere, snapshot, video record of you. You could be doing you're just minding your own business, and that can get out into the media world. So, like you said, Michael Jordan was super protected, but he also didn't have to deal with the modern media. And if he did have to deal with the modern media, well, what keeps him alive is the modern media because a lot of them are our age and they were fans. So
Yeah.
they love him still and they still talk glowingly about him, despite the fact that they get access to him now as a retired player. Of course, he's going to be a little bit more cordial because he wants to be painted in this good light. But like Terry said, like you dare not, you know, cross him. He was the ultimate good guy of the NBA. Where
Yeah.
nowadays you got a ton of villains in the NBA, and they're battling ghosts of the past who are the good guys. So I don't know how Michael would fare in today's modern age of media, but yeah, you dare not cross him. You dare not because that could, like Steve Wolf, that could be your job.
Yeah, I think Jordan definitely benefited from having played during his era. I personally do not think he would have the same impact if he had to play right now in 2025. And mostly because of what you were saying, Jimmy Mack, these phones and everybody has a podcast, everybody has a voice now, right? People will create a fake page just to be able to talk mess about you, right? So whether it's true, whether it's not true, you don't know what's real media or real news and what's not. And so you have modern athletes now like LeBron, and they face like immediate feedback, sometimes negative, and whether it's right or wrong, it's instant. Jordan didn't have to worry about that. So if Jordan were playing right now, anybody that felt like they wanted to say something negative about him, they would say it. It would be out there. TMZ would capture it. They would repost it, and nothing
Mhm.
would happen because it's not them. It's like, they're sharing a screenshot. This is what
Mhm.
people feel, or this is what somebody else recorded. And so I think it makes it a lot more difficult for players right now, emotionally, even because some players aren't as strong, right? You've got to be a really strong person, let alone professional athlete, to be able to deal with the constant scrutiny of your quote fans, right? Some
Mhm.
people that may be knowledgeable, other people that aren't knowledgeable, that they don't know anything about you, but they have all of these opinions and insights on what you should be doing and how you should be doing it better. So I do not think Jordan would be as successful if he were playing right now in 2025. There's so many different icons that we could touch on right now that are just really kind of creating a name for themselves. And I'm just really curious as to what their future holds, because I just don't see anybody being able to create an iconic name like Jordan did. I don't know. Who do you guys think is up next?
Well, LeBron's been up next for a long time. Remember, he was on Sports Illustrated cover when he was still in high school.
True.
So I think because he grew up in this age of media and sports media, he's so used to it. Like it don't even bother him. He knows he's gonna be critiqued and criticized since day one. I was one of his biggest critics when he first came out of high school. I was like, he ain't Kobe. He ain't about to do that. But then over these years, you're like, man, this dude is really,
He's
really
solid.
good.
He's pretty solid.
He's really, and he's just a solid person at
Yeah,
that too. I
absolutely.
mean, we don't know every inside of him. You hear the rumblings that he do this, do that, but we don't see it out in the public. We just see this good guy who cares about community, brought his friends up with him, things that they tell you don't do. Don't bring your friends along. All them dudes are successful. You're just like, man, this dude is really do it with all the scrutiny that he takes. So it's just like, man. So he's been up next for a long time. Anthony Edwards said he don't want no parts of it. He's like, I'm good. I don't want to be the face. John Morant has just taken himself out of it with the gun charge and just out there wilding out. So I mean the next face, I mean to me would be Luca now that he's in LA. You know, as long as he continues to have success in Hollywood, he's gonna be plastered everywhere. And once his English and personality gets better, he's probably gonna sell everything.
Really.
I think so.
I never saw Luca as having that star quality, but I guess it's possible. I guess it's possible. But the oddest thing is, since we're all black on here, I'm just gonna say, we're like the biggest group of consumers. So I just never really imagined a non-black athlete being able to sell products the way that like a LeBron or a Jordan or a Kobe has, just because we're the buyers of it, and we typically, are kind of, I don't want to say favored, but we've got some pretty solid athletes. So when our athletes are doing something, we're going to buy it.
But Caitlin Clark, you see, they pushing her to everything now, so you don't necessarily have to be that.
I don't know
You
if we
black.
buying it.
Oh yeah,
I'm
but
buying some Candace
but
Parker and Angel Wilson
yeah,
stuff.
but that also goes against that we're the biggest consumers. In reality, they say we are, but we are not. We're only 11% of the population here in the United States. We don't have that purchasing power. But I mean, we love our people. We'll support our people, but the biggest consumers everything, rap music, white people.
True,
When
true.
we're watching black movies, white people go see the black movie. So they're really the biggest consumers by numbers and volume. It's just that as they say, we show up and show out for our people. So
Yeah.
that's why it always is like we're the biggest consumers.
Well, we might be the biggest wasteful consumers. I don't know.
That now that part.
I don't know if anybody can ever catch Michael Jordan when it comes to um,
Building a brand.
selling products or building a brand. And the reason is because Mike was able to exist in a time where he could be silent on social issues, and he didn't comment on social issues. Now players are taking the stand, like I can't breathe, and they'll protest and they'll take a knee. And so our community will not allow for you to be silent when there's a social issue, you know. And if you speak on social issues as an athlete, you know, brands will just pull their marketing from you. That's just the
Mhm.
bottom line. They just won't put the money behind you. And so, you know, I think about, you know, Michael Jordan in the context of, do I judge him as an individual, or was he in an unwinnable situation? Because, you know, he just became the face of the league. He was the first face of the league. So there was no blueprint on how to manage, you know, the NBA and your moral presence. And
Mhm.
so, you know, I held it against Mike that he didn't take a stronger stance on social issues, right? So you look at it, he had Craig Hodges on his team who won the 3-point shooting contest, right? Multiple years in the NBA All-Star game, helped Mike win a championship, right? They go to the White House. Craig Hodges wears a dashiki. He shoots a free throw at the White House. He gives a letter to the president asking for more support for social issues. And Craig Hodges never plays again in the NBA,
Mhm.
right?
Good Lord.
Never plays another game. And you would think that Michael Jordan would want his floor spacer, his 3-point shooter on the floor. He would have enough cachet to stand up and say, hey, let's not blackball the guy. He still deserves an opportunity to play. Mike says nothing. You have the
Mhm.
Rodney King video, the incident. They asked Mike what he thought about Rodney King. And Mike says, oh, well, I need more information. I need to learn more about it, right? And he's quoted as saying, you know, well, Republicans buy tennis
Five
shoes
shoes.
too,
Yep.
right? And so that's something we would just not tolerate. You would get your black card revoked if LeBron, Anthony Edwards, or somebody says something like that today. So I don't know if the climate of America will allow you to be silenced, if you know, our voice, now that we have access to the media, will allow you to be silent. So I don't know if any player can ever amass, you know, Mike's level of success or support from the media and the brands. I just don't know if that's possible.
Yeah,
Most
I
definitely agree with that.
definitely. I mean, the Jordan brand is everywhere. It's on a golf shirt. It's on, golf spikes. It's on some probably some football cleats somewhere. I mean, he
Mhm.
took being
Boxing everywhere.
yeah, he took being a basketball player brand to being a brand, like period. Do they have Jordan dress shoes yet?
Dude, my beloved university is sponsored by Jordan. So UCLA football is running out on the field with Jordan. With him doing this, it's not even a football player on the jersey. He's still
Right.
in Jumpman. So I mean, like he said, his brand is it's been from just like basketball specific to his life. It's life. Jordans. I mean, they got kids who can't even walk got on Jordans.
I mean, well, that
Like
was my kids, but it's so crazy. My daughter probably doesn't even know who Michael Jordan is, and she still wants Jordan shoes. Like Jordan to her is probably just a brand. She probably has no relationship to this brand actually being a person that was a prolific basketball player and all those other things that come along with him as an individual. So, yeah, from a branding perspective, he's almost separated from the brand at this point.
mhm.
You know, and it's interesting to wonder whether or not the NBA wants somebody to be that big and to be that powerful, because you know LeBron has also amassed a empire as an agency,
Yeah,
right?
Mhm.
Not only making money from his play, but the play of others while
Others.
he's
Yep.
still in the game, right?
absolutely.
And I heard an interesting take on the Shador Sanders issue. And the issue was really Deion Sanders appeared to be growing an agency where he had all of these players, where he was originally serving as Shador's agent and Shiloh's agent, right? And so now you have uh, the number 2 pick, Travis Hunter, wearing Deion's signature suit and doing his dance from "It Must Be the Money" as he goes across the stage, you know, when he gets drafted, right? And
Yeah.
so now, you know, as a organization, you have to be kind of concerned, like, do we allow people to become agents, control the flow of players, control, the amount of money that they're making. Like, do we even allow somebody to get this big and this big and this powerful? Because I just think like Shador just speaks to the fact that the NFL just refused to let Dion get off of the ground, and the other Colorado players that played for him that should have been drafted much higher got drafted much lower.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's just like, hey, let's just cut this off at the knees. And, we don't need it. We don't need a Michael Jordan, in football, somebody with that kind of leverage. We just don't.
Well, I don't think it's more of a Michael Jordan. It's more of a LeBron James because Dion's going to open his mouth and Dion will find
Okay.
himself to many platforms. So, like with LeBron, he's going to say something. And I think the NBA, they cringe because when he's calling out things on social justice, it makes these owners look like, okay, so what you going to do?
Yeah.
So I think once he's gone, you will never get that again. And I think the NFL is like, we'll never have that. Not that Dion is going to speak on social justice or social matters, but Dion will take the opportunity to call somebody feet under the fire for not doing the right thing. And they can't have him have a control. I mean, I personally think that Shador is going to have to basically be Tom Brady in status in order for him to stick around. He's going to have to really outperform with who he actually is as a player to stick around. I think they're going to do a lot to keep him because it's just like we're not going to have people's daddies controlling the narratives, kind of like how they do in basketball. Remember when Lonzo Ball came out in the NBA? LeVar was in everything. LeVar was doing everything. And I don't think the NFL wants that. They can't have that. And those owners will reject that at all costs. Where in the NBA, it's kind of like, go ahead. We need another villain. The more villains we have, the more people want to watch and see them fail. Where the NFL doesn't want that. They want that shield to be crisp and clean. Where the NBA is like, the more characters we have, the more people are going to watch. Dennis Rodman wore a dress. That's all I have to say. You're not doing that in the NFL.
No, you guys are definitely on point with that. I think it's a matter of control as well, just from a business perspective, because, as an owner of a team, you're still looking at these players as employees. And no employer wants employees that are looking like and or acting as though they own the team or have so much free range that they can just do and say whatever they want, right? So at some point, they've got to maintain control. And if part of being able to maintain control is to not allow that person the opportunity, then I think that's what's going to happen. And it's unfortunate because, we should be able to take these opportunities and have a platform to where we are being able to speak out on certain things. But from a business perspective, you have to understand the overall organizational goals as well. And sometimes individual goals or individual group goals, whether that be a ethnic group or religious group or, sexual orientation group, those just don't always line up with what an organization's goals are for everyone. And I think sometimes we get some athletes or some icons that are too passionate because you can't do that. You're still an employee, right? If you want to be that passionate on certain issues, you almost have to become your own business. And as long as you're still under contract and on the court or out on the field, you have to abide by whatever that organizational's goals and rules are, because at the end of the day, that's what you signed up for. That's what they're paying you for. And any outside contracts or in today's era, NIL deals or whatnot, they still don't supersede whatever your contract is with that, team or organization, because that's most likely how you got the NIL deal or whatever type of endorsement deal that you might have.
Was the Michael Jordan years the best era of basketball in the NBA? Like, do you
No.
guys have some thoughts
No,
about that?
no. So I think because to me the greatest decade of basketball that we've seen was the 1980s. I wasn't fully aware and conscious of sports in the 70s. I was born in 76. I can only hear what my dad and my uncles talk about, but the 80s I was there to witness it. You had four dynasties and a burgeoning fifth dynasty. The people don't understand the Milwaukee Bucks were good enough to probably win an NBA title. They just kept running through, coming in and around at the wrong time with the Celtics or Sixers. But that's when it was at its best, because even though Jordan wasn't winning, he was an icon. You still have Magic Bird in their heyday. Kareem was falling out of his prime, but he was still so iconic as a player. Isaiah Thomas and the Bad Boy Pistons had become something. Dr. J had fizzled out. You getting all these Patrick Ewing, Charles Barkley. You was seeing all these great young players infused into it. But when the '90s came and they started making these rule changes to limit how the game was played, you start to see it get watered down a little bit. So Jordan won in a, I wouldn't say a more watered down because you still have these great individual players. I just think the team concept wasn't as good because everybody wanted to mimic what the Bulls were doing because they were winning. So I'm gonna have one guy shoot all these shots and everybody else just kind of play a role. But you had all this star power, and some of those guys were like, "Man, I'm not doing that." So you had dysfunction on teams like the Atlanta Hawks in the early '90s. They could have won an NBA championship, but I'm just not let Dominique shoot the ball all game long. So you just seen the strategy change and shift in the Bulls because they already had what they were doing and having Phil Jackson. And people to understand how important that having him as a coach was. He was able to facilitate this to where nobody's ego got so big that we're not going to have success. You know, because people say Jordan had a big ego, but he understood his role and he needed Pippen, he needed Rodman, he needed Grant, he needed Ron Harper to guard the perimeter players so he can get his shot off and not tire himself out. So I think that he won in the era. It's still great, but it's not the greatest that we've seen, or at least in a decade, because by NBA you got to break up in decades, not actual eras. His decade that he dominated just really wasn't the best.
Yeah. I think this era actually is one of the best. There's so many great star quality players that you almost don't know who to watch. So it makes you become a fan of the NBA, not just an individual player or an individual team. Like I've got
Mm-hmm.
so many favorites. And a long time ago, I was told that, you know, you can only have like one team. But I think as a woman, I can have as many
What?
favorites as I want. So
Mhm.
I love a lot of different players, and they are all my favorite players. There's not just
Yes.
one favorite. There are too many great players and great teams right now to say, you know, oh, the Lakers are my team. Okay, I'm in LA, born and raised, love my Lakers, love my Sparks, but there
Mm.
are so many great teams and so many great players. I just can't limit myself. I refuse.
The media would have you believe that Michael Jordan played in the toughest era and the hardest era to win, and that was the best era of basketball. Like, you know, like nobody's been able to come close to what Michael Jordan hasn't been able to do. So that really must have been the best era. And I personally think Michael Jordan, from Michael Jordan's entry into the NBA in '84 up until today, I think Michael Jordan played in the most watered down era of the NBA. And it has a lot to do with the expansion teams. So, with the expansion draft, teams were able to protect a certain number of players, and then the players that were remained were chosen by the expansion team, right? And so now, if I said certain teams to you, you would see them as a formidable opponent, but back then they were nowhere close to title contenders. So you had the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Orlando Magics, the Miami Heat, the Vancouver Grizzlies, the Toronto Raptors. These weren't contenders, right? But later came the Charlotte Hornets, but the Charlotte Hornets took 16 players off of other NBA rosters. So all your glue guys, all your hustle guys, you know, if you have five teams pulling from other teams, that dilutes the talent, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think that Michael Jordan excelled in an era when the NBA had the most diluted talent. So let's just say you took Penny Hardaway and Shaq, right? And you put one of them on the Celtics. Put Shaq on Utah Jazz, right?
Yeah.
now, now you got a different legacy, right? And so you see, you know, Mike was blessed to have two other Hall of Famers with Rodman and Pippen, other NBA All Stars. Tony Kukoc, Horace Grant made an All-Star team 1 year. B.J. Armstrong made an
Armstrong.
All-Star
Yep.
team, right? He played with that level of concentrated talent but it kind of explains when the other teams only had 2 all-stars, and so he never faced 3 all-stars in a final. Never, right?
Mm.
And so, but like I said, put Shaq on Utah. Now we got a different story, right? But because of the expansion league and the league was growing and there, then he was just the best player in an era where it's the beginning and then the genesis of these teams that just simply weren't contenders.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah. And I agree with Marlo. It's so much good talent out there. Like I sat back one day and was like, none of my top 5 players that I like, not that they're the top 5 best, they're not on my NBA team. They're not on the Lakers. They're not on the Clippers. Giannis,
Yep.
Anthony Edwards, Ja Morant,
Yep.
Jalen Brown. I love
Yep.
Jalen Brown. They're not on my team. And Jalen Brown, I shouldn't even cheer for this dude. He played for the Celtics. But it's like I find myself like I love his game. I
Yeah.
love his political stance. I love what he does as a person outside of just basketball. So it's so much like so many players out there that you're just like, man, that dude is great. This dude is great. And like Terry said, at a time it was only 38% of the games are being viewed. I can go on YouTube and watch a game. I can go on Peacock, watch games, TNT. I can just watch basketball all day if I felt like it. And any team I wanted to watch. You
Yep.
didn't have that, back in the day. So it's crazy on how good the NBA is. And like Terry said, Jordan was in expansion area. When's the last time we expanded the league? When's the last time we added a team to the league? I mean, even like like you said, the Timberwolves and the Magic. The Magic hit fire early because they got Penny and Shaq. The other teams took a while to build. It took
Yeah.
a while to even get there. Toronto didn't become anybody until Vince Carter got there. That's
Yeah.
when people started paying attention. And Vancouver ain't even there no more. They're in Memphis. So it's his era. Like I said, you had a lot of great individual players, but also you didn't have a lot of great teams. His toughest competition was maybe in that decade, New York. They got to the finals twice in the '90s and lost both times. So
Yeah.
yeah,
you,
it's
I'm
good.
I'm kind of taking issue with you saying you shouldn't be a Celtics fan. You know, um, I'm a diehard Celtics fan, even though I grew up in Oakland, because I played for the St. Augustine Celtics, and I
Okay.
think that you have an obligation as a black man to
Oh yeah, Bill
be,
Russell.
but beyond that, this is why you should be a Celtics fan. Chuck Cooper was one of the first black players to play in the NBA. He was a Celtic. The
Hmm.
first black coach was a Celtic with Bill Russell. The first black general manager was a Celtic with ML Carr. So
Hmm.
when you talk about pioneer and moving, our brethren forward, they were Celtics. So I know y'all LA people and all that kind of stuff, but I just wanted to drop that on you to say, open your heart to the Celtics. They've done something for
Thanks
the
for
people.
those nuggets. Thank
Totally understand that. And then with the racial identity of Boston, to have all that happening is really, really big too,
Yeah.
because how racially charged that city was during that time. To have all these black athletes for your basketball team doing what they were doing was great, but no, purple and gold.
All right, it's cool. I got you.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up now. MJ's legacy was it was fascinating. It was brilliant. I don't think we'll ever see that again in life. But make sure you guys join us next time on Huddle and Whistle as we explore why some coaches might not favor your child. Right?
Mhm.
That's going to be a good one. That's our next episode for episode 2. So until next time, we'll see you soon.
All right.
Peace.